Hey everyone, welcome to Crushing Classical, redefining a thriving classical music career. I'm Tracy Friedlander, and today I have Jonathan Eifert, pianist and founder of Jonathan Eifert Public Relations. On this show, we go into what all of this marketing talk really is and what it means and where it's all going for the future of musicians creating their own unique careers in this day and age. Jonathan shares some of what he did to grow his large following and how he has helped artists establish themselves and grow their audiences. I'd say the biggest takeaway from this conversation is just how important and relevant it is for everyone to get started on this and create a presence for themselves online. Before we get started, I'd like to thank Fix Music for being a sponsor of Crushing Classical Podcast. FixMusic.com is your online resource for high quality and affordable sheet music. There are some great new offerings at Fix available that you'll want to know about. Now there's organ music, lots and lots of choral music, as well as orchestra parts that you may need for concerts or auditions. And guess what? They are also actively working with choral and orchestra directors to help plan their seasons. So if you're a program director and you want help on choosing pieces for your season that you might have not already thought of, contact Fix Music today through their website. And as always, free shipping on all domestic orders. Check out fixmusic.com for your sheet music needs and use the link in the show notes to receive 10% off your order. Let's get started. So welcome to Crushing Classical, Jonathan. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Tracy.
I'm
Pleasure
so
being
glad you're here. So I randomly discovered you through Instagram, but also through I'm not saying that right.
Oh,
Adaptstration.
yeah. Adaptistration, I believe it's called. Yes,
Okay.
Drew McManus, the consultant in Chicago. Yes.
Yes, I was doing some social media, clicking, following a post, and I found you. And then I read your article about influencer marketing, and I saw that you were a PR person and a classical musician at the same time. And so I wanted to get your story. So what were you doing as a musician before you started working in PR?
Yeah, well, basically, my time as a musician was very short-lived. I really did my undergrad in piano, and that was about it. I knew early on that I did not want to have a full-time career making money as a musician.
Oh, really?
You know,
Okay, so what made you
but
know that? What had you know that?
I think it was a series of events, but I think I saw other people who were very talented going on, and even though that they were extremely talented, it wasn't like they were living this great life, because to generate income as a freelance musician, especially just starting out, unless you're a superstar or like some childhood prodigy or went to some, had some big break, it's very, very hard to get traction. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously there are people that do, but it's a very small percentage who actually get traction.
Right, and
So,
piano is so different. Piano is like either you're a soloist or you accompany people and maybe play an orchestra gig sometimes, right?
exactly, exactly. And
Yeah.
that's why a lot of pianists who go to school and study it just end up piano teachers, which is fine. I mean, being a piano teacher or having your own studio or being a collaborative pianist, that's excellent. And it's very rewarding. But I knew for me, I didn't want that to be my life. And
Right.
so everyone has to make a personal decision. And I did. And I thought, well, let me explore other career options. And that's what really brought me to my first arts management role.
Okay.
I did an internship at Astral Artists in Center City, Philadelphia. And they're a classical music incubator for career development. So essentially what a lot of musicians are trying to do after they graduate conservatories, they're trying to get management, they're trying to get higher profile engagements. Astral really helps with that and
Okay.
building that solid career foundation after the artistic process is firmly rooted.
Hmm.
And I got a lot of good management experience there, doing lots of office work, and was there for a whole year as I was finishing up my piano degree.
Okay.
And it was at Astral that they said, if you really want to go into arts management as a career, you should think about going to grad school, but not just going to grad school, go to London specifically, because if you are able to scale London and really make good contacts there, you'll have far greater ease making contacts or building a business or whatever in the United States, specifically New York. And, it was a kind of a radical concept because I haven't really heard other people talk about this. I haven't heard other people even do this. And so I'm a risk taker, and I thought, why not? So I did. I moved to London. I studied at University of London and did an arts management degree, specifically in branding and marketing. And that's where I wrote my thesis on branding opera singers, actually.
Oh.
And it was through that I ended up getting an internship at IMG London, the big artist management firm, and in the vocal division. At the time, they had a vocal division specifically working with a roster of singers that, it was just really great work, great experience. And through that management role, again, kind of 2 back-to-back internships coupled with the grad work and research, I liked it all, but I wanted something a little bit more creative. So PR still wasn't in my field yet, or still in my kind of view. It was still very much a management role.
Okay.
I thought, well, what else is there? What could I be doing? And it was really at IMG that a lot of the people kind of mentoring me at the time said, you might be a really good fit for PR. This might be something you should look into. And so I did, and then I ended up graduating and moved back to the U.S., and people had heard here in the U.S. what I was doing in London. And it really happened organically. People came to me and said, oh, well, could you promote this concert? Could you help me with social media, et cetera? And it was kind of that grassroots, really organic way that I was able to build my PR firm. And
Great. So when you said people started asking, or were these just former colleagues or friends that you knew? Like what people? Like
yeah,
kind of.
about people. No, they were people that I knew personally.
Okay.
Were living on the East Coast. They wanted to get a bigger profile, or they wanted to put butts in seats
Right.
at a venue, and they knew that I was working and in classical music in London, but also specifically with marketing, with social media, branding, and how to take a branded approach to PR. And I guess they found it compelling, just as I found it compelling. But it was nice that they validated that.
Yeah, because that's kind of new, isn't it, in classical music, taking a branded approach? And can you explain a little bit about what you mean by branded approach? I think I know what you mean, but I want to hear how you describe it.
Yeah, certainly. So taking a branded approach to marketing or to your craft, especially as an artist, it's all really personal branding. Personal branding meaning just like corporate branding, where you stand for something. People know you to do X, Y, and Z. Mm-hmm. They know you to appear a certain way, to act a certain way. That's basically what personal branding is. I mean, just as corporations do, you can also apply on a personal level, although it's different because you're a person. But what was lacking, especially now, this is going back about 7-8 years ago when I was doing this sort of initial work. It wasn't really a common thing for classical musicians to think about branding themselves online or on social media. I mean, there was obviously conversations on how to market and how to perform on the world's greatest stages, but that's very different from how do you just market yourself in general mm-hmm. to get those engagements, especially with the rise of social media at the time, 8 years ago. And it was kind of through then research and then getting started with the PR firm that I was practicing these ideas, putting them to work, seeing the results, and then more and more clients kept coming.
Interesting. So I love the whole concept of it because it puts more on you as a person, as a personality to take control of your career in another way. And I think, like you said, 8 years ago, that was new. I think it's still a really new concept. Maybe not so much for opera singers as much, because they really are like free agents. They're trying to get gigs and trying to get hired by opera houses and stuff. But I'm coming from the orchestra world, and I wonder if you've had much experience with branding individual musicians or people talking to you about branding themselves online like that, social media wise. And what about just regular old kind of Joe Schmo classical musicians, like someone who's, say me, a horn player? I might want to audition for an orchestra. Do you see in the future that it might actually matter?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I think not just in the future, right now.
Right now,
I mean,
okay.
It's something that all musicians, no matter what level you're working at, or even if you're just in conservatory still trying to gear up for a career in classical music, or if you're mid-career, it doesn't really matter. You should have or be developing a personal brand, be standing for something, be known as something, put a vibe out into the universe that this is what you do, who you are, and that you're consistent about that. I think one thing that's the greatest challenge when working with musicians at any level is the consistency. They might have great ideas, they might produce a really great album, or they might produce a really great recording of a performance, of a live performance, for example. But just because you do that doesn't mean that your work is done. The marketing aspect is every single day. I mean, before, when you just had print, newspapers, etc., you didn't have to be in the newspaper all the time. You could be there once and done, and you're fine for a season, kind of thing. But now, with social media, and especially with everyone else clamoring for attention, you have to also be clamoring for attention, but putting content out there that aligns with your brand.
Yes. And so one of the things you said, I don't mean to interrupt you, but you said something that I want to go into a little more. You said something about, what do you stand for? So, like, what are some of the things you've seen classical musicians stand for? Are you thinking, like, what kind of examples do you have of that?
Well, for example, I think one, I guess, to use a former client of mine that is doing a really great job now, who's taken, I think, my advice and gone on and done great things, is Michael Fabiano. He's an excellent tenor right now in the opera world, doing great things, performing on the world's greatest stages. And I worked with him a few years ago when he was really breaking into that top level and really trying to push on his social media and grow the following. And we worked together doing various things with his social platforms. But one thing was just pulling out the sense that he loves music education and wants to help others and wants to encourage them to attain their best selves, to learn all that they can. He also had interest in flying and transportation and infrastructure in the U.S. And so this sort of content, pumping that out on a regular basis, where you are standing for certain things or talking about certain things, like these topics I mentioned, people start to see you in a different way. Yes, they might know that you're a singer, but then they also know that, oh wow, this person likes this, and they have an interesting perspective on that. It's that added, like I say, brand dimension. It's not the sole thing that you do, and that's not necessarily where you're making your income, but it adds to that main role that you have of being a musician. Because when you add dimension, just like, a painting, a visual painting has textures to it, or it has certain lighting to it, you can, appreciate it more and value it more. And I think so is the case with personal branding, that when you add other facets, you create a more in-depth character. And really, you're just being more human. You are just tapping into your humanity even more. But what makes it different from just doing anything is, and why it's branded and personal branding at its best, is it's reaching into a particular realm that you value and that you stand for and that you want to be known for. It's not pushing anything out into the world. It's not, saying, well, like I love, maybe taking hikes in the mountains, or I like sailboating, or I like, all of this sort of thing. It's not saying that I'm going to talk about all of these things. I'm only going to focus on one. Right. And because, and this is the point, branding is singularity. At its core, branding is singularity. You have to be known for one particular thing. Right.
Yeah, that makes sense, because you can be like, well, I love all these things, and then it's like it doesn't make sense.
Exactly.
Is there a line where well, yeah, if you pick the one thing, then you can focus on that plus the thing that you do. Like, so he's a singer, but also really passionate about education in certain whatever way that is. And so then he's known for those things. And then on top of it, he does this flying thing and he's interested. I could see how he picked a couple of key points, or the things that he's most passionate about. I've been talking a little bit on posts about telling stories and how that draws people in and makes it more interesting. Like the other day, I had kind of drew a connection between, you remember when you're in music history class and the day that your teacher, like everybody remembers the day that your teacher said, Well, there's this story about Robert Schumann and Clara Schumann and Johannes Brahms,
Yeah,
and he was in love with her, and he was best friends with him, and it was this weird. I mean, and that makes you go, wait, what? They
yeah,
they
it's
had
juicy.
this love
It's
triangle,
juicy.
like it humanized them. It made
It
their
really-
story more interesting. And then you go, well, what is this music he's writing about? Is he so, he's so gut-wrenchingly in love with this person he can't have, and now this is the music he produced over that or whatever. So there's it's just so much more interesting when you can find out something else about the person.
Absolutely. I think it's just it does come down to that idea of having these personal conversations, but yet what you're doing is what you might talk about with a friend or when you're trying to portray your best self. Then on social media, you're expanding that, blowing that up to what I like to call industrialized intimacy. You're basically taking something that is just done between you and a friend in terms of, oh, you're talking about shared interests, mutual interests. You like to go to new restaurants together, you like to go to shows, you like to go hiking, whatever, and you select one of those things and you share it with the masses essentially in such a way that people feel close to you when they have no idea who you really are. Now,
Yeah.
it's not saying that you're being fake. You'd be 100% honest. You're 100% who you are. It's just that you're not telling them everything that's going on in your life.
Right.
You're not oversharing. You're not saying, tons of personal details that could, hurt you. You're just picking one aspect of your life and blowing that up to add that brand dimension.
Yeah, that I love that because I'm glad you added that bit at the end there because yeah, people also will go to the opposite extreme and say, "Oh my gosh, I don't want to share my entire life with everybody. I don't want to have that as my social media." But at the same time, that's not what it's about. You're sharing this one thing to show your humanity essentially.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, that's what it's all about, I think. And when you're able to do that in various mediums, with videos to photos to blog posts to emails that you send to your following, it doesn't matter what form it takes. You can provide that industrialized intimacy. You can basically carry out your personal brand and promote that singular idea that people know you for being this one particular thing or this
Yeah.
one
Do
package.
you know what? That's what I love about stories so much on Instagram because you can easily do that without overthinking it. You can be like you do on yours. Like, look, I'm in the Hamptons right now. But you don't have to be like, this is everything I did all weekend long, every minute when
Right.
I was in the
No,
Hamptons. But it's just like a few snapshots of some stuff you did. And you get
exactly.
to say, like, oh my gosh, that's really cool. Look at what he did this afternoon or whatever. So,
Exactly. It doesn't have to be hard. It's not.
yeah.
I like to tell people it's not rocket science. I mean, I think oftentimes people think of PR as being nebulous and elusive, but it's not. I mean, it really is. There are concrete things you can do, and at least that's my approach. I think publicists and PR firms take different approaches, but at my firm, I really take an approach of being real, being authentic, and taking that branded approach. And that
Yeah.
when you do that, over time, you see public perception change. Because really, I think what we're talking about, and people could say, well, fine, I'm doing all of this. What's the main goal? What are we trying to do? What we're trying to do is build a fan base. When you have a fan base, or in other, like the old school terms, is having a good reputation. It's funny. I mean, we don't talk about necessarily, oh, they have a good reputation, but really that's what we're doing. I mean, this idea of how many followers you have or you're following, that's your reputation now. That's
Hmm.
essentially what we're dealing with. But we use it in terms of the following. That's the new language. And that's what we're driving. When you are able to build up that following, you have greater opportunities. So essentially, by branding yourself, you have a bigger fan base, which leads to greater opportunities professionally and personally, really.
Right. So these might be opportunities that you wouldn't necessarily even know are right around the corner. Like here's
Exactly.
someone justifying this, hearing this and going, well, I just want to audition for an orchestra, or auditions for orchestras are behind a screen. Nobody is not going to know who I am when I do that. So what difference does it make if I do that? But on the other hand, that's not going to be the only thing that you ever do. Like you're saying, it's going to open up opportunities for you that you might not even know are going to be there.
Absolutely. You're going to be connected with people that you didn't even know were out there, and people that share similar interests.
Hmm.
They might not be people that you do business with directly, but they might know people that refer you, or they refer you to others or other organizations. I mean, it's all a close network.
Right.
And I think artists know that it's about the networking, but they sometimes forget that doing this social media bit, shall we say, strategically, really has a big impact.
Yeah.
You can't just be oversharing or sharing anything. You really do have to be strategic.
Yes. So what have you seen examples of people who overshare and it's too random and like
Well, I never mentioned names of people doing it poorly. But yes, of course, there's tons of people. I mean, I get to use Facebook as an example. I get so many friend requests from so many people all the time, and it's kind of weird where people come out of the woodwork. It seems, but I often poke around and see what they're doing, and it's just they post weird things, and they're most likely in the music industry. I'm connected to them because they're in the music industry, but they're posting weird things, and I'm like, why would you ever do something like that?
Right.
So.
So you think people should be thinking about this all the time. I mean, and I agree with you. Um, if you're using your profile for just friends or whatever, there's ways, and we won't get into this nitty-gritty stuff, but there are ways you can just share only with certain people. If you want to be random and weird, just select like people for a list and only show
Yes.
that to them and make sure that you're remembering that before anyone ever meets you, they're probably going to search you on Facebook just to see who are you? What are you doing? You
Exactly.
know, do you
But
have your bio updated? Can I tell what you're doing based on just one glance? Or is it
yeah,
hidden? Are you just not sharing, you know?
first impression so important. But I would to continue this thought further. I would say you really have to think about. You might have a closed list of people,
Hmm.
but what's personal is professional, and what's professional is personal, especially in the music industry. And so, yes, you might be sharing it to a closed network, fine. But more often than not, those people, even in the closed network, are also connected to God knows
Hmm.
who. So you really do need to treat everything as your brand. I
Good
mean,
point.
more often than not, I am encouraging artists, clients to make their personal Facebook or personal accounts on whatever platform professional driven. That it's not you're not thinking. I mean, you can be personal, but you can be personal with a professional mindset, and rather than being thinking, oh, I need to just be super personal, and then everything goes south. I think
Right.
you still need to be very, very smart. And it also serves for the purpose of just the way the Facebook algorithm works at the moment. Professional fan pages are great because it allows you to have a lot of people like and follow you, but because there is a cap to the personal limit
Hmm.
on Facebook. But the problem with the fan pages, the professional pages, is Facebook kind of locks them down unless you're sponsoring content. Oftentimes, even though that you're posting and people are following you, they're not being reached.
Yep.
So that's why I'm often encouraging clients to post whatever they're posting on their professional pages to their personal pages, so that you're actually reaching those people.
That's a good point. I'm going to take that advice
Just
actually.
approach. You know.
That is a really good point. Yeah, and I know some people use their profiles. I've seen this in other niches where people just use their profile. They don't even have a page, and they use their entire profile for posting about their business.
Yeah,
You know?
exactly. I mean, and there's a line to draw. I mean, obviously you can be too pushy,
Right.
but I think if you find the right balance of adding value and entertainment to people's lives,
Yeah.
when you have a pushier post that is more action driven, it's okay because it's balanced out by other things.
Right. And I love that you said value because that's why you follow anybody because they
Yeah.
bring some kind of value. They entertain you, they make you laugh, they it was an interesting story or whatever. So that's why I get all up in arms when I see pages for people's new ensemble that they created and all the posts are we have a concert. The next
Hmm.
post is our upcoming concert. The next post
Yeah.
is, gee, we had a really great concert last night. Come check us out for the next concert. And then the
Yeah.
next
And you're like,
concert.
God, I can't wait to go next time.
Yeah, it's like, well, what else? What else do
I
you
know.
guys do? What else
But
are
th-
you about?
that is the best example, what you just said. I mean, because I think that's what we're up against. Is many people think doing social media, especially the artist world, that they think doing that will suffice, that's
Yep.
what's necessary. But it's not. I mean, yeah, that you need those types of posts, but you need so much more to, again, going back to that brand dimension, adding that. Because when you add the brand dimension, that's what drives the following, that's what drives the reputation, and that's what drives the more greater opportunities in the future.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And so, I've been wondering something because this is a fascinating topic for me personally, and I've been just reading and absorbing as much as I can about it just on my own. And one of the things I think about a lot is how symphony orchestras do it because with a symphony, you have here's the group of musicians, and that's their job, and they play. And then behind the curtain, in another building, in another 5 miles away, there's an office building. And those people are in charge of the PR and the marketing and the social media and all of that stuff, as well as paychecks. They pass those out. And it's completely separate. But the
Yeah.
social media people have to get some content from somewhere. So they just make stuff up. They will take some pictures of musicians, or they'll talk about the next concert or the tour or whatever, but there's not really that personal branding going on at all. Like there's no personal brand because there's no person. So what have you ever thought about that as far as going for a group situation? Because I know you've worked a lot with opera singers and individuals, but what about that? Have you ever been approached by it? I'm asking too many questions in a row, but like, have you been approached by orchestras or do you have ideas about that?
Yes, absolutely. So I do work for quite a few organizations around the country, and one of them is an orchestra. And the degree of service varies. I think, there's a level of the need and what needs to be done. There's also a level of what's the budget and what can be actually implemented.
Right.
So again, what's needed versus what the reality is very, very different things. So yes, have I seen a need for it? Yes. Have I seen budgets ready for it? No. There are two different aspects to that. In terms of the need, if we just talk about the need, one thing I think that orchestras can really do. In fact, recently I wrote a piece about influencer marketing, and I don't know if you want to go into this at the
I think
moment.
we should touch on it and then probably go like in a whole other episode with it because there's so much to unpack about influencer marketing. But can you tell me what influencer marketing is for the audience too?
Yes, of course. Essentially, it is using people with large social media followings to persuade others to take action.
Okay.
That's essentially influencer marketing in a nutshell. You can apply it to any industry, and I think what makes it unique for the classical music world is I haven't really seen it done yet. Maybe some people are doing it, but from my understanding, the people that I've spoken to in important roles around the country, it's not really being done.
Do they know what it is?
Well, that's probably part of the problem is that they're not quite sure. Oftentimes, these people at these organizations follow influencers in other industries.
Right.
So, they're kind of aware of that, but I don't think that they really made the connection that we can also be using this in the classical music world.
Right. It's fascinating.
Yeah, no, I think it's really, really interesting. And this idea of using, tapping into a large social following, when you can use other people to help sell your concerts versus just your traditional marketing collateral, I think is a really compelling case to pursue that. Obviously, that's a whole project in and of itself. Like that's a whole PR marketing endeavor in and of itself.
Yes.
And I think a lot of orchestras don't necessarily have the budget at the moment to really full on pursue that. They would if they reorganize the budget. I mean, obviously this can be done. It's not hard per se. It's just because a lot of these administrators think in a certain way and how to allocate money. Specifically, a lot of money goes toward traditional advertising. If they were to reallocate money toward more social money, whether it be for Facebook advertising, influencer marketing, I think you would see a great difference. But that takes a lot of time to reorganize the budget, and also having administrators ready to take that chance.
Right. It's a risk because they've never done it before.
Exactly.
So what kind of influencer, okay, so would you say, let's take an example. Like, would you necessarily say that it would have to, I guess it wouldn't really have to be like a classical musician influencer. There's a handful of those, but like could be somebody who is an influencer in your exact city, who is all about going out, who's all about doing things out in the city, like what's the best restaurant? Oh, what's the best thing to do on the weekend? And you could have that person promoting for the whole weekend a specific concert series, right?
Absolutely. I think when it comes to influencers and how you partner with them to help your ticket sales at a venue, I think it is all about tapping into people with similar interests, but not direct interests. I mean, tapping, like you said, people who have maybe that going out and about, like things about town, people who are going to gallery openings, who are going to fashion shows, who are going to museums, and who are going to restaurants and trying out new cocktail bars. People like that are really interesting because they have a really diverse following, but it's still focused in terms of people who like elevated entertainment, shall we say. So typically, people like that who like elevated entertainment would be a good fit for classical music, because classical music, while I think it's meant for all people, it does have a bit of an elevation to it.
Yeah, it's something more out of the ordinary that you do as opposed to just wandering into a bar and seeing a live music that happens to be there. And I'm just like, my wheels are turning. I'm like, what if you had somebody who was like, the influencer's project for the season is to go to everything in a series. So they're going to be at that concert, in May, June, or, not the summer, I guess, but like September, October, November, like once a month. And as their influence goes out, because they couldn't just do it one time.
No, this sort of thing, especially when it comes to influencers, it's really best you build up the rapport and build up sort of partnership, a longer standing partnership. I mean, yes, you could, in theory, dip in and dip out to promote things, but I think it would be better that you develop that kind of season relationship, say for a one concert season. Like you're saying, where they attend multiple concerts, there's part of the agreement would be multiple posts on social, multiple stories on Instagram, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So you're technically, I mean, I read your article, which I will link in the show notes so people can read, because it's a great article.
Thank
you.
And
you say that you yourself are an influencer because you have, what is it, 13,000 followers on Instagram?
Almost 13,000. And I classify myself as a micro influencer. So here's the breakdown. Technically, in the larger, no matter what industry you're in, if you're over 10,000 but under 100,000, you're a micro influencer, meaning you're delving into a niche group of people who have, niche interests, that sort of thing.
Okay, currently I'm micro influencer.
That's okay. But once you pass 100,000, then you're a full-on influencer, and for anywhere from 100 to whatever in the millions.
So they don't care who it is. They don't care who you're. Even if like 20,000 of your, well, maybe not 20, but there's a lot of fake followers out there too. And I don't know, like
there are websites. I forget the names exactly, but I've looked on them before, where you can test out if they're real or what percentage are real followers versus bots or fake.
Oh, okay, that's good to know.
Yeah, I need to look back into that in terms of the specific website. But I remember reading recently, and a few months ago, I had tested my own out, and I think I was at like 98% real. So
that's great.
I know it was very, very high. So I'm thinking and assuming that these people who are in corporations commissioning influencers, that they are doing the same. I don't know, because I'm not holding those positions, but I'm pretty sure that that's what they're doing.
So how did you grow your following so big?
Yeah, so I have an assistant. She did amazing work for me in terms of growing, meaning she was engaging with other accounts that aligned with my brand, or aligned with the brand that I wanted for my Instagram account. Mm-hmm. And she, over the course of 6 months, I believe, grew it from 500 followers to about 13,000.
Wow, that's great. I need your
six
assistant.
months. It's
That's great.
uh,
Well, and you said aligned with my brand, and then you said, well, aligned with my brand that I want on Instagram. So do you have different, because I've noticed that people on Instagram engage differently than people on Facebook on my
yes.
posts. So, gosh, I hope I'm not going too many different random directions, but
No,
this,
it all is relevant and falls into the same
okay,
idea.
because this one really, like, this just made me think of this. I noticed that, like, Instagrammers, at least the ones that follow me, resonate with one kind of post a lot more than the ones that I put on Facebook. So I'll see that. Like, I'll put two of the same version on because I have to, edit because I have like these really long posts that are almost like blog posts I put on Facebook and then they don't fit on Instagram. So if I
Yeah.
do put the same one, if I can get it to 2200 characters, I'll post it. But sometimes I can't because of that. But I'll just notice that that's different. So how do you navigate that? Number one, and are you on Facebook too? I assume you are. Do you
Yes.
have your own page, or do you just do it from your profile?
Yeah. And so they're all very good questions. I think number one is you want a brand that's synchronized across any platform.
Uh huh.
Number so as a overarching strategy, yes, you do want a singular brand no matter where you are: Instagram, Facebook, your website, Twitter, YouTube, etc.
Right. Okay.
However, having said that, and because of the way the followings work on different platforms and even the functionality, how it works, you do want to vary your content and maybe vary how you speak
Mm.
or the kind of content that you're pushing out on those platforms. So I do, even though I have one unified brand, it is varied in terms of the platform. So, for instance, since we were speaking about my Instagram account, it's very lifestyle driven. So
Okay.
it's very much what I'm doing in New York or when I'm traveling. It's my life as a running a firm, a startup, that sort of thing. But at the same time, the other platforms like Facebook, I do have a professional page as well as a Twitter account and LinkedIn, and those platforms are more sharing client work,
Mm-hmm.
sharing maybe press placement that I got for clients, sharing projects that I'm working on, ideas, the articles that I write for Arts Hacker or for my own website, sharing more thought leadership content. Whereas, like I said, Instagram is lifestyle. So very different, but it does help cater to.
It all feeds together, but that makes sense for the social. I mean, for the Instagram page because that does well on Instagram, especially for stories. You can't really talk about a whole article and the concept of it in a story. It's much easier to share just an array of photos of what you did in New York or on the weekend or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And really, I think, the other strategy, what I'm trying to do here too, and it might be valuable for your listeners, and that is diversifying your following. My Instagram followers are very different than who are following me on Twitter. Twitter, I have a lot of key industry people in the United Kingdom, in Europe, and in the US, but a lot in the UK. And that is very valuable for my business. And so, in terms of growing my reputation in the classical world, it's very valuable to have Twitter, and specifically to classical music. But my Instagram, and kind of why I pursued this project with my assistant to grow it, was I wanted to tap into a different demographic outside of classical music. So I wanted them to fit under my brand in terms of who I am and what I'm doing, but I really wanted a new crowd. Not so that I could sell my existing services to for classical, because I rarely talk about my classical life on Instagram. Like I said, it's more lifestyle. If anything, I'm almost waiting for the opportunity to maybe go into lifestyle marketing or go into have a division of the company that goes into I don't know, some product lines or something like that where I would produce and sell. And for that sake, it's really nice to diversify your following so that if I want to do something else other than classical or simultaneously, because I am interested in both sides, that could be possible with this new following.
That makes so much sense, especially because it can get to be, you can feel sort of like, wow, this niche is so small, classical.
Yeah,
And so, how do you keep growing within that? The answer is open it up to another demographic. So
exactly.
that's really wise.
it's something. It's a grand experiment. I think everyone needs to admit that the kind of platforms that we have right now and what's being done today and then tomorrow and in the future, we are in uncharted territory.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people, they want to see statistics and hard metrics and everything, and we can prove that from the past, but we don't know what's going to happen in the future. And just like any time in history, but particularly now, because it's so radically changing and because these platforms have unprecedented reach and power to sway public opinion, as we know in politics, how can we then use this in the music industry? And who's to say what could happen? And that's why I'm always open to diversifying following, but also why I'm such a proud proponent in creating branded content on these platforms.
Yeah, not only that, like not only being conscious about what can change and what's happening across the platforms, but also being conscious of what you might want to do yourself in the future. Like you just said, I'm not sure what I'd want to do if it was outside of the classical niche, but wouldn't it be fun to have options? And you're just building towards something, and maybe that's unknown, but you're still building towards it. So
Exactly. And these things take time. I mean, no matter if you're
exactly.
just pursuing one following and that's it, or multiple, I mean, anything, it takes time. I did get lucky, I will say, that my Instagram grew as fast as it did. I think a lot of times that typically doesn't happen. So I got lucky. But at the same time, I know it's possible for other people. I mean, the strategy is very simple. I tell people you have to have branded content, and then you have to build the following. And once you have that, those kind of things together make you grow.
Yeah, and one of the things you mentioned about growing was engaging. And I think that's one of the missing links that people don't do sometimes, I mean, you do have to go out there and like other people's stuff and comment on their stuff and socialize on
You
social
have
media, right?
to socialize. And that is, I think socializing on social media can almost be a job in and of itself.
Yeah.
Oftentimes for clients, I find that is a job in and of itself. So the people that I work with, contractors and such, and I find that that's what they're doing, is that they need to devote so much time just to interact with our clients' following.
Yeah. Definitely. Oh my gosh. So there's a couple of there's like I would say I know of maybe 3 or 4 classical musician influencers that I can think of off the top of my head. And you probably know them too if you're on Instagram, just violinists and different people like that. What do you see about what they're doing that do you think, oh gee, they could do more with what they have, or do you think, oh, I'm just gonna have fun and grab a bowl of popcorn while I watch this happen and unfold and see what they what they end up doing with their following? Because it's curious. Like, what do you do? Not that this is going to be a dilemma for a lot of people, for the majority of people, but what do you do once you have 100,000 followers? And is that the goal for everybody, or like, you know what I mean? Because someone might listen and go, I don't care if I have 100,000, and some might go, oh, I just wish I could have 100,000 because that would be amazing. But like, what are the ramifications? Does everyone need to get that many? What do you do once you have that many?
Well, I'll start again by saying a overall concept, and obviously this is not new, but it impacted me. Vera Wilson, who is the founder of Astral Artists in Philadelphia, which I opened that I had worked with, she was so brilliant in saying, Jonathan, you have to know what you want to get what you want. And, it's not, I'm sure many other people have said that, but for me, it really hit home when she had told me, and it was like, wow, I have to know what I want to get what I want. And I think that's the same with any of this that we're discussing. Growing a following, what happens when you do hit 100,000 followers? What happens when you hit 10,000 followers? Even 1,000. I mean, what do you want? And I think it's all personal. It all depends on what the individual or the organization, for that matter, really wants. If you do want to do product placement, then you need to have a bigger following. You need to have like 100,000 or even 10,000 to start doing product placement, and that's fine. But if you're trying to, say, as a musician, grow your following for the sake of performing more and getting into higher paying engagements or be placed in larger orchestras, or I don't know, maybe tour as a solo artist more. You have to be strategic in that the goal is growing your following for that purpose, for concertizing, for playing at a certain orchestra. Meaning, when you're building your content and pumping that out and you're following, you have to be kind of hovering around those people. So if you're trying to develop a following in London, you have to be following London people. You have to be engaging with London people. You have to be posting content that's relevant for that particular area. If you're trying to have an international career and trying to develop things all over the place, you should really focus on all the key cities in Europe, UK, and the US in terms of trying to get started. That's what I would recommend. But it really is, it's a personal thing. You have to know what you want to get what you want.
That's great advice. Wow. That's such great advice. So we're gonna wrap up with one more question, and then I want to talk to you about maybe coming back on to dive into more stuff, maybe on a Facebook Live, and we'll make it into a second episode, because I think there's so much more to unpack about influencer marketing and what there is to do with it, and just I think there's more here. But I want to ask you one more question, and it's not on the list, so hopefully it doesn't put you on the spot too much. But
Right question.
if you had to give the audience 2 or 3 people that you think would be really great people to follow on Instagram and or Facebook, that do this stuff really well, could you think of a couple people off the top of your head? It doesn't even have to be in classical.
Yeah. Well, I think let's keep it classical. I think
Okay.
one person that I really admire what he's doing, and obviously he has a huge career, and that is the pianist Stephen Huff.
Okay.
Interestingly enough, it's not like, well, I don't have his numbers off the top of my head in terms of how many followers he has on these platforms, but I know he has a sizable amount. But for his branding, I just really appreciate how he's been able to shape his brand. And why I say this is he has the brand dimension of, or the brand of being one of the great pianists, performing on great stages all across the world, but for the dimension, he has artwork, he writes, he contributes to, I believe, the New York Times, one of the newspapers in London, I forget, maybe the Independent or Guardian, one of those. He is a MacArthur Fellow. He really is the quintessential Renaissance man. And I think he's been able to push various dimensions of his overall brand out into the universe in such a way that people really respect him. And obviously, it shows because from a career perspective, he has such a great career. And I think, that's really the thing that tests the waters. We can say, oh, well, I'm doing all of these brand dimension things, I'm doing social media. Is it going to actually get me where I want to go? Now, I know he is an older artist in terms of he's not starting out anymore. So his path was probably very, very different than a lot of emerging artists at the moment. So I understand that. But in terms of someone using platforms and having this varied brand dimension that people really know about, I think he's doing an excellent job. And then the second person example, look at Michael Fabiano. I think he really is doing great work, not only because I had worked with him, but just because even right now, he is on the other side. He's on the, he's in his 30s, beginning, or on the kind of entering the mid-career point, and doing exceptional work. His following is huge. The kind of content that he's pushing out is very interesting. And I think those examples between Stephen Huff and Michael Fabiano will serve great examples for your people listening.
Okay, great. I'm going to add those immediately because I want to see classical musicians doing different things. And I follow a few of the influencers now, but I have not heard of either one of those. So I'm excited to see what they're doing and get ideas too about the whole picture, the whole picture branding. I just love everything that you mentioned today. It's so great. So great. And what's your handle too for people?
Yes, my handle on Twitter and Instagram is at Jonathan Eifert. Jonathan, Jonathan. Eifert is spelled Eifert.
Great. I'll tag those or link those in the show notes as well. But go and follow Jonathan and get more. You'll get 13,000 and million for all the people who listen.
Let's, let
So awesome. Thank
again,
you
my
so much.
Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you so much for being here today, and I really appreciate you coming on.
My pleasure. Take care.
Take care.